Welcome to this lecture on animal behavior. Today, we are going to explore one of the most fascinating questions in biology and psychology. How do animals learn? We will dive deep into two fundamental mechanisms of learning: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. By the end of this session, you will understand not just the biological concepts, but also the mathematical models that predict how animals, and even humans, adapt their behavior to survive and thrive in a complex world. Let us get started. To begin, imagine walking down the street and suddenly smelling the exact perfume your grandmother used to wear. Instantly, you feel a wave of warmth and comfort. You did not consciously choose to feel this way. Your brain automatically connected that specific smell to loving memories. This is the heart of classical conditioning. It is a fundamental type of associative learning, where an animal learns to connect a previously neutral stimulus, like a scent or a sound, with a biologically significant event, like food or danger. This allows animals to predict what is going to happen next in their environment, which is a critical skill for navigating the world. Now that we understand what classical conditioning is conceptually, let us look at the formal scientific terms introduced by the pioneer of this field, Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov famously noticed that dogs salivated not just when tasting food, but upon hearing the footsteps of the person bringing it. In this scenario, the food is the unconditioned stimulus because it naturally and automatically causes a reaction. That natural reaction, the salivation, is the unconditioned response. The footsteps originally meant nothing, but after being paired with the food, they become the conditioned stimulus. Eventually, these footsteps trigger salivation all on their own, which we call the conditioned response. The animal has learned a predictive relationship. Understanding these terms leads us to ask, why does this matter so much in the real world? The answer is survival. Classical conditioning is absolutely crucial for an animal's survival in the wild. For instance, if a bird eats a brightly colored poisonous butterfly and gets violently ill, it will classically condition that bright color to the feeling of nausea. This ensures the bird never eats that type of butterfly again, effectively saving its life. In human society, this exact same mechanism explains how we develop irrational phobias, how advertising works by pairing products with happy images, and how we successfully train service animals to assist people. This brings us to a fascinating question. How can we measure this learning? Psychologists use mathematical models to track the strength of these associations over time. The most famous is the Rescorla-Wagner model. Conceptually, this formula is built on the idea that learning only happens when the animal is surprised. If it already perfectly predicts the food, no new learning occurs. Let us look at the variables. Delta V represents the change in associative strength, or how much is learned in one trial. Alpha and beta are constants, representing how noticeable the bell and the food are. Lambda is the maximum possible learning based on the reward's value. Finally, sigma V is what the animal already expects. The difference between lambda and sigma V is the surprise factor. As expectation increases, surprise decreases, and learning slows down. Before we move on, let us see this formula in action with a concrete example. Imagine we are training a dog by ringing a bell and giving it a piece of steak. We want to calculate how much the dog learns on the very first trial. We are given that the noticeability of the bell, alpha, is 0.5, and the value of the steak, beta, is 1.0. The maximum learning, lambda, is 100. Since it is the first trial, the dog expects nothing, so sigma v is 0. We substitute these values into our equation. The term inside the parentheses, 100 minus 0, represents the maximum surprise. Multiplying 0.5 by 100 gives us a final answer of 50. Physically, this means the dog acquired half of the total possible association in just one trial, showing that early learning is very rapid because the surprise is highest. Now that we have calculated the learning mathematically, let us visualize the entire process. On screen is a diagram showing the 4 stages of Pavlov's experiment. In the top left, stage 1 shows the period before conditioning, where the unconditioned stimulus, the food, naturally causes the dog to drool. In the top right, stage 2 shows the neutral stimulus, the bell, causing no response at all. Moving to the bottom left, stage 3 is the acquisition phase. Here, the bell and the food are paired together, and the dog drools because of the food. Finally, in the bottom right, stage 4 shows the result after conditioning. The bell has become a conditioned stimulus, and ringing it alone now produces the conditioned response of drooling. The animal's brain has successfully wired these 2 events together. Having explored how animals learn automatic reflexes, we now shift our focus to a different type of learning. Think about a time you touched a hot stove as a child. The intense pain taught you a clear lesson: never do that again. Conversely, if you studied hard and got an excellent grade, the pride made you want to study more. In both cases, your future behavior was shaped by the consequences of your past actions. This is the essence of operant conditioning. Unlike classical conditioning, which deals with automatic, involuntary reflexes, operant conditioning is all about voluntary choices. It explores how the results of those voluntary choices influence what an animal decides to do next. To understand how these voluntary choices are shaped, we look to the work of B.F. Skinner, who pioneered the method of operant conditioning. Skinner proposed that learning occurs through a system of rewards and punishments for behavior. He introduced 4 main concepts to describe this: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. In this framework, the animal is not just passively reacting, it is actively operating on its environment. When the animal acts, the environment pushes back. If the outcome is favorable, the behavior is reinforced and likely to be repeated. If the outcome is unfavorable, the behavior is punished and likely to decrease. This constant feedback loop shapes the animal's future actions. So, where do we see this in action? The real-world applications of operant conditioning are virtually endless and govern much of daily life. It is the primary mechanism used in animal training, from teaching a pet dog to sit to training dolphins for complex marine shows. In human society, our entire legal and economic systems are built on these exact principles. We work to earn a paycheck, which is positive reinforcement, and we obey speed limits to avoid getting a ticket, which is punishment. In the wild, a foraging animal uses operant conditioning to learn which trees yield the sweetest fruits and which hunting techniques waste too much energy, constantly adjusting its behavior to maximize its chances of survival. This brings us to an important question. When animals have multiple choices, how do they decide which behavior to perform? Psychologist Richard Herrnstein developed a mathematical formula called the matching law to describe this decision-making process. Conceptually, the law states that the rate of a specific behavior is directly proportional to the rate of reinforcement it provides. Let us look at the formula. On the left side, B1 and B2 represent the rates of performing the first and second behaviors. This fraction calculates the proportion of total effort dedicated to option 1. On the right side, R1 and R2 represent the rates of reward received from each option. In plain English, this formula says that an animal will match the percentage of its effort to the percentage of its income. If a food source provides more reward, the animal will proportionally increase its time spent there. Now that we have the formula, let us apply it to a classic experiment. Imagine a pigeon in a Skinner box with a red button and a green button. We are given that pecking the red button yields a food pellet on average 40 times per hour, so R1 is 40. The green button yields a pellet 10 times per hour, so R2 is 10. We want to find what percentage of its total pecks the pigeon will direct toward the red button. We substitute our reward rates into the right side of the matching law equation. The denominator, 40 plus 10, represents the total number of rewards available per hour. Dividing 40 by 50 gives us 0.80. Physically, this means the pigeon will direct exactly 80% of its pecking behavior toward the red button. It optimizes its energy to perfectly match the environment's payout structure. To understand how these experiments are actually conducted, let us look at the diagram of a Skinner box, also known as an operant chamber. Inside this controlled environment, you can see a rat facing multiple interactive elements. There are two levers, labeled Option 1 and Option 2, which the animal can press to make voluntary choices. Above them are a speaker and a light bulb, which act as environmental cues. When the animal makes the correct choice, a reward is delivered into the food dispenser tray. Notice the electrified grid floor at the bottom. This can be used to study negative reinforcement, or punishment. This simple yet powerful setup allows scientists to precisely measure how different consequences shape the animal's behavior over time, proving the mathematical principles we just calculated. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us summarize the most important ideas. First, classical conditioning is all about learning to predict the future. By pairing a neutral signal with a meaningful event, an animal's brain wires them together automatically. Second, we saw through the Rescorla-Wagner model that this associative learning is heavily driven by surprise. Third, we explored operant conditioning, which explains how voluntary behaviors are shaped by their consequences, using rewards and punishments. Finally, the matching law proved that animals do not just guess randomly. They perform a highly mathematical optimization of their effort based on the rewards available to them. You now have a solid understanding of the fundamental mechanisms that allow animals to adapt and thrive in complex environments. Great job!